Hey guys, I'm coming on here live again. I've decided that I have a plan for these live sessions. I have decided I'm going to start going back through some of my favorite blog posts and the posts that I feel are most helpful, and I'm going to talk through them. I had feedback on my last live video saying that people who maybe don't have time to sit down and read a blog post, they can take these videos on the go and listen while they run errands or listen kind of like my podcast. So if I had a podcast, this is what I guess it would be. So we're just going to talk through some of my favorite blog posts, and I'm going to be able to get that information to you guys in a different way. These also will be able to be posted on my YouTube channel. So I'm trying to grow that account a little bit as well. And I'm also sharing them on my Facebook pages. So it really helps me get that information out there in a different way to some different audiences. And I'm live, so that's kind of fun, and you can ask questions. Be sure to put questions in the actual question section when you're asking them, and that way they don't get lost in the comments, and it's easier for me to see them and respond. So today we're talking about how to become a pattern tester, how to become a successful pattern tester. So I honestly didn't test a ton of patterns before I started writing them. I tested for a few people. Usually it was friends, and we kind of helped each other out, and it was never really something that I would have put, in my bio as being, someone who's asking people to reach out to me for testing patterns. But with the more and more patterns that I put out there and the larger my tester pool becomes, I'm realizing that there's a lot of information that's super helpful for people who are looking to get into pattern testing if it's something that you want to do. So I wrote a blog about this, and I'm going to walk you guys through that blog post and share some of that information. And again, if you have questions, pop them in the question box and I can answer them. So let's see. So what exactly is a crochet pattern tester? Most of you guys know this. It seems pretty rudimentary, but let's go through it. A crochet pattern tester is a crocheter who is sent an unpublished pattern, so either a rough draft or this could kind of be the final draft of a pattern. It might be a living document. It might be something on Google Drive where the pattern tester can go in and make changes, and that's where you keep checking back for the pattern and follow on that kind of live document. The person testing the pattern, they make the actual item, make sure that it fits properly, and then they'll also check for errors. So this could be stitch counts, grammatical errors, issues with the fit, anything that means that the pattern didn't really set out to make what it was going to make, or it did. So it's really figuring out if this is a successful enough pattern to publish, if people are going to understand what you're trying to make and what you're trying to do. And this is what our pattern testers help designers like me. That's what they help me do. I would at this point never put a pattern out there unless it's been tested. And the more complicated the pattern, the more testers I'm going to have. So if I have multiple sizes, I'm going to have multiple testers testing out each of those different sizes and giving me feedback and making sure that not only is it readable, but that the pattern actually fits and does what it's supposed to do. So that's what our crochet pattern testers do. So I have a couple of tips that for me have been some of the big pieces that help me figure out whether or not someone is going to be the right person to test a pattern for me. And this is the advice that I give to a lot of people if they've never tested patterns before and they're looking to break into it. Number one is following the designer on social media. So if you've been following someone for a while, or if you know of their designs and you're extremely interested in testing for them, maybe they put out a lot of different patterns and you've been following them, following that progress, be sure that you're actually following and engaging with them on social media. Make sure that you are, commenting on their posts, and you want to be on that designer's radar. You want them to know who you are. So make sure that you're actually interacting with them. Make sure that you reach out if they are asking for tester applicants. You can reach out and let them know, if you have a background, if you're new, but that you're interested in testing. But make sure that you're following them. That's a big one. I have had some people who reach out and want to test for me who aren't following me. So it kind of makes me wonder, well, do they know my aesthetic? Do they know what I'm looking for? Do they know what some of my past patterns are? So Make sure you're following the designers that you want to test for. Have a public social presence. So obviously, if you're watching this on Instagram, you probably have an Instagram account. So you want to make sure that your Instagram account actually shows samples of your work. So if someone applies to test for me, they give me their Instagram account, I go to their Instagram account and there's no crochet on the Instagram account, it's going to be a lot harder for me to justify choosing them to be one of my testers because I don't know what their work looks like. Some of these testers will kind of slide under the radar for me, and I will accept them, or I will reach out to them one-on-one because maybe they applied to test a size that I really still need testers for. And I'll reach out to them one-on-one via, direct message and ask them to send me some samples of their work, some photos, just so that I can make sure that they have the skills needed and that they have actually, maybe if it's a cardigan, that they've made some kind of wearable outside of just scarves or hats. But make it easy for the designers, because not every designer is going to reach out and say, hey, can you send me some samples of your work? You want to make it easy for them to see what you've done and the quality of your work and your aesthetic and whether or not you can take good photos of your items, because that's very important these days. So make sure that you have that public presence on social media. Now, this could mean outside of Instagram. This could mean you have a website that showcases some of your work, or if you have a Facebook page, you just want to have some kind of public presence where designers can go and see your work and make sure that you make that clear when you apply. All right, the next thing is to make sure you're actually qualified for the item that you apply to test for. So this is, kind of piggybacking off of the last point of making sure that you have public samples of items that you've made in the past. Designers need to make sure that if it's not an extremely beginner-friendly pattern, that you are going to have the skills to actually complete it and complete it on time. And not only complete the pattern, but give feedback on the pattern. So if you're struggling through the pattern and there's things that you don't understand, it's going to be a lot harder for you to correct things like stitch counts, grammatical errors, catching issues with the pattern. So you really do need to make sure that you're fluent at the level that pattern is going to be written at. So something that you can do, especially if it's a new designer and you've never tested for them before, or you've never tested at all, go and see if that designer has free patterns on their blog, on their website, and kind of look at how their patterns are written up and make sure that you can understand their writing, because their free patterns are probably going to be a lot like their patterns that cost money. So you can go and check out the free patterns, make sure that you understand how those designers write out their patterns, make sure that you can understand it. And that'll also help too on deciding whether or not you actually want to test for that particular designer. So make sure you're qualified. Make sure that, if you've only ever made hats the entire time that you've been crocheting, that you're not going to apply to test your first pattern that's an intricate sweater. You're going to want to make sure that you've made some of those items before you apply to test that item. The next tip is to complete some of the designer's patterns not as a tester. So if there's someone that you really, really want to get into their testing pool and you want to get noticed by that designer, you want to make sure that they know that you are qualified to work their patterns, then buy some of their patterns, or see if they have free patterns on their blog or on their website, and try those patterns out. Photograph those patterns just as if you were testing them, showcase them on your social media platforms, and tag the designer. This really puts them on your radar. This lets them know, yes, they can make my designs. They obviously made one here. Their photography is great, so this would be great marketing materials if they were to test for me. I know that I'm going to get good photos. So it really just solidifies in that designer's mind that you are someone who could successfully test a pattern and give that feedback. So try some of their patterns out. That would be the next tip. Next up is focusing on your photography. So again, I mentioned this in the last tip. You really want to make sure that you can take good pictures of the items. Especially now when designers are looking to showcase their patterns on all different people, all different bodies. They really need you to be able to send them good quality images that they can use on their social media feed, that they can use in the marketing materials, that they can use in the listing of the pattern, that they could maybe even use in the actual pattern itself. I know for me, I started including some end pages to my patterns that have photos of each of my testers in different sizes, along with their measurements, which allows people to really see, okay, this is how this size looks on this person who has similar measurements to me. So making sure that you can provide those photographs is extremely important, especially now. So with photography, I have a whole blog post about photographing and, you know, tips on that. But the biggest thing is make sure that it's natural light as much as possible. So that means getting outside. You can go outside. If that means setting yourself up next to a window, as you can see, I have the light coming in on the side of my face from my window. So I have one nice big window in my house, and that's usually where I photograph my items. You want to make sure that they're as high resolution as possible. Sometimes this is limited if you only have your phone. The good thing is a lot of phones nowadays, if you just upgrade your phone to something that's a little bit newer, or you've already done that, you're going to have pretty high quality images just from your phone, especially if you're able to utilize the natural lighting. The other thing is to take multiple photos. So take photos of the front of the garment, the side of the garment, the back of the garment. Really try to give some options so that the designer has things to work with and are more likely to use more of your images. So if you can take quite a few for them to choose from, that's going to be super helpful. The other thing is, if you don't have someone to help you take the photos, then you may want to invest in my phone is actually being held up right now. It's a little tripod that I got off of Amazon for like 20 bucks. So you might want to invest in a little tripod so you can set your phone up, have it facing you in selfie mode so that you can see what the picture is going to look like. And usually these little tripods come with the remote control buttons. So that's something that you can use to take, help you take a little bit better photos if you don't have someone to help you take those photos when you need them. So those are my tips for photography. Make sure that you work on those photos. Again, this is where you can go make some of that designer's items, photograph them on yourself, share them on social media so that they see, yes, this person checks all the boxes. They're going to get me great photos. They already are familiar with my work. They're following me on social media. So these are leading up to even more, ways for you to become even more qualified and potentially get on the radar of these designers that you might want to be testing for. The next thing is to be reliable. Be reliable. Make sure that if the tester needs things from you, if there are specifics that they need from you, if there are deadlines, which there's always a deadline, you want to make sure that you are going to be able to meet those deadlines and make sure that you can actually get the designer the things that they need. And this is for both of you. If you apply to test a design, maybe the designer doesn't give you a lot of information up front. Maybe they just give you a deadline and then they choose you to test, but then you get an email with a whole bunch of other things that are included. Some designers want you to do a video of yourself wearing the item. So as soon as you get that email, if you realize, I don't know if I'm going to be able to meet all of these demands in this time frame, get back to them immediately and tell them that. Say, I really want to test for you, but I am a little worried that with this timeline, this may not be feasible for me right now, but I would love for you to keep me in mind for future designs. But you want to contact them as soon as you realize this, because, it's quite a process a lot of times to fill different sizes and fill different slots for testing. So you want to be really quick on that communication side and just be super honest with the designer. And that's going to help make sure that you're not going to blacklist yourself, from getting to test for them in the future. You're just making sure that they know, okay, this person, they don't want to sign up and then not be able to come through, because that's going to be a lot worse than letting them know ahead of time, hey, this is just not something that I'm going to be able to handle right now. So how do you be reliable? The first thing is paying attention to details. Make sure that you have all the materials that you need. So if it's calling for a certain yardage or a certain yarn, you want to make sure that you can get that yarn and it's not going to take you a month for it to get shipped. So do make sure that you plan for that time if you're going to have to order that yarn. The right size hook, usually testers are going to tell you the yardage that you need, the size hook, the materials that you're going to need for the project when they actually do the call for testers. So really watch out for that before you actually apply to test. The second thing is really look at your calendar. Make sure that you don't already have too much on your plate in order to meet that deadline without being stressed out or feeling rushed. If you rush through a pattern, you are much less likely to be able to take detailed notes and give that designer the real feedback that they're going to need, which then will end up with them saying, I don't know if I'm going to go with this tester again because I didn't get enough feedback to feel like they were actually looking through my pattern with a fine-tooth comb. So you really want to make sure that you can dedicate that time to really pay attention to the pattern and be thinking about things outside of just getting the pattern done, because it is a lot more than just creating the item. It's making sure that you're catching any errors that are happening in the pattern and that you're paying attention to the fit, you're paying attention to the gauge, you're paying attention to the measurements, you're paying attention to the yardage. You want to make sure that, okay, if they called for 200 yards and it took me 300 yards, you have to bring that to the attention of the designer so that they know that they need to make adjustments. So make sure that your calendar is free enough for you to be able to complete everything that is needed before the assigned deadline of the pattern. The third thing on being reliable is understanding exactly what is expected from you. So for me, I try to be extremely clear as a designer in my initial email. I break down exactly what I'm going to need, exactly what questions I'm going to need answered at the end. And I try to break it down in a way that's easy for testers to just respond to the email and kind of fill in those blanks. So that has helped me a lot. Let's see. I ask my testers to submit total yardage, specific measurements, grammatical corrections. There are still times that I will get a final email from a tester that says, thank you for the chance to test. The pattern was great. And they'll have photos, but there's no feedback on the questions that I actually needed help with. And that goes back to what I was saying before, how it is a lot more than just getting a free pattern and making the item. It's really dedicating the time to make sure that you're willing to give feedback and watch for things in the pattern that might need to be brought to the attention of the designer. All right, so my next tip for being a successful tester is applying the right way. So all designers have different systems for people applying to test. So you want to make sure that you really pay attention on how they want you to apply for these tests. I used to ask people to send me a direct message via Instagram with their email address and the size that they wanted to test. And then from there, I would email out the people that were accepted. As my testing pool grew larger, I realized that that wasn't something that was going to be feasible anymore because messages get lost in my Instagram message box. And so I created a form that puts everything all in one place for me and then puts it into an Excel. So this is through Google Forms. But this has become extremely helpful for me because they all get put into this Excel and then I can go through and choose my testers. So the issue is sometimes I'll do a call for testers on my Instagram page and I'll tell people exactly what to do. Usually there's a link in my bio. They'll click the link in the bio, fill out the form. I will still have people who will comment on the post and say, I want to test the pattern. And that's it. So I won't get a message. They won't fill out the form. So you really need to make sure if you really want to test for this person, you have to go through the right steps. You have to make sure that you do exactly what they're asking of you because, I'll have anywhere from 20 to 30 testers for some patterns. That means anywhere from 40 to 50 people applying to test patterns. So if you don't go through the correct process, I'm not going to have time to follow up on comments or on direct messages of people interested in applying. So make sure you apply the right way. I think that was my last, that was my last tip. So I hope these tips were helpful. If you're interested in becoming a tester, it really is about interacting with the designers that you really like, supporting them by making some of their free patterns if you have time, and then photographing those free patterns, showcasing those patterns on social media so that you really get on that designer's radar and they see that not only are you supporting them and you like their patterns, but you can make their patterns very well. You can photograph them well. You may be in a perfect size range to help that designer expand their sizing. I know a lot of designers right now are in need of plus size pattern testers because we're all trying to be more inclusive. And you know, if you've ever designed a pattern, you'll know that it's very difficult to, especially when you're first starting out, to try and create sizes for someone other than yourself. Especially if you, I know for me, I didn't follow a lot of I didn't follow a lot of patterns when I first learned how to crochet. And so it was a very new and unknown territory for me as a designer, trying to figure out how to be more inclusive, create those sizes. Now I've gotten pretty good at understanding, you know, how much more length is needed on additional sizes, how much width, and the changes in sleeves and things like that. But a lot of that was a back and forth kind of collaboration with my testers to find out what worked and what didn't, because, you know, most of us, especially designers, you want to create things that not only are inclusive, but really fit all bodies, and really are tailored to make sure that because it's never one size fits all. We all know that. So, you know, support your designers, make sure that you're following them, make sure you apply the right way, make sure that you're reliable, and you know, that you really structure that time out. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. This video will be posted to IGTV today. I will be posting it on YouTube and on Facebook and getting all of that out there. So let me double check and see if I have any questions. I don't think I do. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is a blog post. This is the second to last blog post that I have published on my blog, so you guys can check that out. If you have questions, you can comment there. You can comment once I post this video and let me know if you have additional questions. But I hope this was helpful. And if you're trying to be a pattern tester, some of the other advice that I've gotten from my pattern testers is don't give up just because you apply one time and you don't get it, or a couple of times and you don't get accepted. Don't give up. Continue to put your work out there. Continue to put your interest out there.